in Penrhyndeudraeth.
We're taking a walk in Gwaith Powdwr, the Powder Works Nature Reserve. For 130 years, this was an explosives factory until it was cleared and given to the North Wales Wildlife Trust. This is where the workers would be patted down by security guards to check they weren't bringing matches on site. At its peak, there were over 500 workers here, many of them women, especially during the war, when they filled 17 million grenades. The site lends itself to explosives. It's set in 3 steep-sided valleys, so that an explosion in one wouldn't trigger another. Somewhere near here there's a tunnel with railway tracks that leads from one valley to the next. That's how they got the goods around the place. This is one of the several explosive sheds, and it's got what's described as a floating roof. So if it did explode, the roof went up, and so did the explosion, as opposed to going sideways, which would have been lethal. And this particular one is used by the volunteers to store all their equipment. And on the door is a white sign with faded black ink marks that says what the chores were back at the end of March. Owl boxes, collect and install. Treat willow stumps, collect fencing materials. The warden tells me they're due back any day soon. I'm sure they'll be really pleased to get started again. Production started here around the same time as Alfred Nobel invented dynamite and subsequently gelignite, which is mainly what they manufactured here. Nobel Explosives was one of the 4 companies from which ICI was formed, and ICI were the previous owners of Gwaith Powdwr. Alfred Nobel's legacy, apart from the deadly explosives, is the Nobel Prize. 4 people from Wales have won the prize, including Sir Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, who lived the last 15 years of his life just a couple of miles away from here by Portmeirion. We're at the top of the site, and what's usually my favourite bird hide, looking in a very sorry state. It's been vandalised. This is supposed to be a site for wildlife, not for wild living. The walls have been ripped off, the wooden boards, revealing what's inside, and what is inside is the famous Ballistic Pendulum. There's a set of railway tracks leading up to the pendulum, and a cannon would be mounted and pushed up on those tracks, loaded with that day's explosives. It would be fired, and the force would cause the cannon to recoil, and the pendulum, all 2 tons of it, would move through an arc. And that way, they could calculate the strength of the explosives. Knowing how strong the explosives was meant a big leap in safety for miners. One of the notable birds to be found here is the nightjar, and as the name suggests, it's a night bird, and its song is a bit like the sound of an engine running out of petrol. This way, Molly, this way. This is one of the many ponds on the site, called the Dipping Pond. Looking out off the pontoon, lots of lilies, white flowers about to break open, and as soon as the sun comes out, I think this place will be teeming with dragonflies and damselflies. The water was an important part of the process, keeping the nitroglycerine cool and stopping it exploding when it shouldn't. Looking down on the left is the River Duret, and a line of creamy brown foam running up the middle. Tide still coming in, but coming up to slack water. The salt marsh lambs have all been pushed to the far side, next to the cliff face. Not much grazing at the moment. 3 people paddling their bright-coloured kayaks downstream. I suspect they came up on the tide and are wanting to get back where they came from before they get marooned on these sandbanks. The view down the estuary is sublime, and it's set to get even better. 10 giant pylons are to be removed and cables buried in a tunnel. Plans have just been agreed and construction should start next year. It's going to cost a fortune, maybe £10 million a pylon. We'll all pay for this through our electricity bills, so come to Snowdonia and get your money's worth of a great view. Come on, Molly, time for home.